Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and we have a show for you tonight. My coordinates to get a hold of me, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. That's how you can get a hold of me. Also, you can send me a friend request on Facebook. Let me know that you are a listener of the show, and so I can approve your friend request. And if you don't do that, then probably not going to get a response. So also Instagram, Josh Turner 940. You want to follow me on Instagram, Josh Turner 940. So those are ways you can get a hold of me, and we can chat possibly. If you have a story, let me know. Let me hear it. And maybe we could see what we could do about having your story told on the show, or you can come on and tell it yourself. So tonight we have somebody that's going to be telling some stuff, some stories. But before we get into that, I want to let everybody know that we are sponsoring the Bigfoot, Texas Bigfoot Conference down in Jefferson. And that's going to be the 14th, 15th, and 16th, I believe. Right, Barton? I think that's correct. Right. And so Barton's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Ken Gerhard's going to be there. And, a bunch of our friends are going to be there. Bigfoot Rob from Michigan, he's going to be there. I believe Tex will be there. And a few other people have told me recently that they're going to be going. I know that Lyle Blackburn's will be there too. He's in the front of ours. So we're all going to be down there at the Bigfoot Conference. I hope everybody shows up. And Celine, a friend of ours, is going to be there. And, of course, my wife will be there. And Letitia, which is Barton's wife, she'll be there calling the shots for Barton, and my wife will be probably calling the shots for me. I'm just kidding, man. I tell everybody what to do. No. So what we have tonight, we have a really, really, really good guest. I've been trying to get him on for a while. We've been talking back and forth for months, and he didn't get to make the Dogman Conference. I was really disappointed about that. I really wanted him there. The only two that didn't make it really were him and Steve Stockton. So it was unfortunate that he couldn't make it, but now we have him on the show, and we're going to record tonight. But first, let me give you this Paranormal Roundtable group. Go join because you can win something. We give away every week. What you do is when we drop this episode on the Paranormal Roundtable group on Facebook, you go make a comment, you leave a comment, and if your comment is chosen, if you're chosen through your comment, then you win a prize. And that prize is an autographed book automatically, and then you might win some other stuff too, whatever we're doing for giveaways at the time for the month. So it's a pretty cool deal. And also, if you're a Patreon member, don't forget $20 tier, you automatically get Paranormal Roundtable swag. If you are a $10 tier, after 3 months, you get PRT swag. So $20 automatically, and then 10 if it's 3 months. So be sure and like and subscribe and join our Patreon. The other thing I was going to tell you is Barton has a group now, and it's called Inhumanoids with Barton Nunley. And that group has grown really quickly. It's over 3,000. I don't know what you have now, 3,200 members now or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and our group is, I think my group is, the main group is about 8,200 or something. We're trying to grow that, and we have Paranormal Lounge with Nellie. We have a Paranormal Prayer group, and that's Nellie's, and then a PRT fan page that was created by Bill Stern, Chris Clough, Curtis Turner. They're always in there doing memes. And no, we're not a cult. I was accused of that.
Really good memes, too.
Yeah, really good memes. Some of it makes fun of me. I mean, they had one making fun of Ken about the Shasta incident down at the conference. So we've had a few, memes, but people are like, oh, it's like a cult. And I'm like, okay, dude, maybe you need to do some research on how a cult really is. I'm not handing out jumpsuits and giving you, running shoes and telling you that the Great Comet's going to come and take us to the planet Zarkon. All right. That's not happening. Not yet anyway, but we'll see. Don't rule anything out. You never know how this could turn out. This is we're blowing up here, but anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce my guest, Tim Kumbo Baker. A lot of people know him as Coonbo. Yeah, his name is Tim, but I'm going to give you the floor, Tim. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Tim.
Okay. I started researching Bigfoot back in the mid-1970s with my friend Jim Hart, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I miss him dearly. But Jim and I met when I was a freshman in college and he was a senior in high school, and we sort of instantly became friends. And we were out here on the farm one night and hunting wild dogs, and a booger, Bigfoot, cut loose hollering about a half a mile east of us there on the back of the farm. And Jim says, "That sounds like a Bigfoot call." And I said, "It is." "You're kidding." "No." I said, "They're out here." And anyway, that was the start of a long 40 plus years of researching. Like I said, that was in 1975. Anyway, I have, after I got out of college, I worked for several government contractors, mostly for NASA and for the Army Missile Command. And I worked for Wiley Laboratories, and I worked for McDonnell Douglas Astronautics and Colazzo Systems Analyst, and a number of other frontline contractors. And I hold a top secret and nuclear Q clearance for combined total of around 31 years. I traveled all over the country. I've researched in 43 of 50 states. I've researched in somewhere like, I think all added up about maybe somewhere 11 to 14 countries outside the U.S. and obviously outside the U.S. And I will tell you, I've been in Africa, Central America, a little bit of Europe, and the only place in Canada, and the only place I have ever found any hard evidence of Bigfoot outside this country was Canada. I have heard lots of stories about them in Africa and in Central America and in Europe, but I have not found any hard evidence in any of those places. Now, I didn't get to spend really any decent time feet on the ground in Europe yet, but I'm hopefully going to get to do that in the future. But I've been doing this pretty seriously. I took my first written report of a Bigfoot encounter in 1978, about 5 miles east of where I'm sitting right now. And I did my first out-of-state research in 1979. Myself and a guy went over into Northwest Georgia, owned property where his great-grandparents lived. And we found lots of evidence of Bigfoot over there. And we actually spent the night over there in a pretty dadgum spooky place. And there was all kind of things that went on around us, and it's still a hot place to this day. But probably at one time, back before the Not Finding Bigfoot guys, probably myself and Tal Branco or Bill White were probably the two most widely traveled Bigfoot researchers in the world. Bill did a lot of study and stuff out of the country. His job allowed him to do a lot of traveling out of the country, and mine allowed me to do a lot of traveling all over the country as well as some out of the country. But way I figured it, Uncle Sam owned me from 8 to 5, and after 5 o'clock was my time, and I could do whatever I wanted to do, and I often did. And I quickly learned that there were a lot of booger activity on a lot of government installations, and I fairly quickly.
That a little bit, Tim.
Do what now?
Yeah, so we was talking about that. So let's talk about that a little bit. We were talking about that some last night. So, yeah, tell us a little bit of what you know about that, about the government's connection to these Bigfoot creatures.
Well, I personally believe that a lot of these government installations, either they were put in that location to protect the Bigfoot and or conceal them, or they were put, or that the Bigfoot were brought into some of these installations. And but one thing's for sure, they can't keep them hemmed up in there. But I know Fort Lewis, Washington is crawling with them. We encountered them in Fort Bragg, White Sands Missile Range, Edwards Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base. Yes, believe it or not, Edwards Air Force Base. There are not very many, but there are some. Yakima Proving Grounds. I'm trying to think where. I mean, just all over the place. I mean, it's really amazing where all they are. A few, believe it or not, up in Aberdeen Proving Grounds. Found them in Western Massachusetts. I spent a good bit of time on couple of projects up at Seabrook Nuclear Plant on the Atlantic coast of New Hampshire. Did a lot of research in New Hampshire and Vermont, and a little bit over in upstate New York, and spent a pretty good bit of time up in Maine rooting around. I never found any Bigfoot up there. Never even found any really decent fresh sign. But I saw some weird things happen. I mean, I ran into some really weird stuff. Now, this was back in the we're talking about in the late 80s, early 90s, back before anybody had even heard about the Bennington Triangle. And I went up to Bennington and rooted around up there because I had heard of, through the grapevine, some reports up in that area. And I spent several days up in that area. Never found any Bigfoot, but I definitely saw some weird crap that went on up in the mountains up there that I couldn't explain. But I never was able to get close enough to it to see what it was. Say what?
No, I was just wondering what kind of other activity did you witness up there with the Bigfoot?
Well, I saw a lot of strange lights up on top of a big mountain up there a couple of different times out north of the town of Bennington. And now I hear, what was crazy, years later, I heard people talking about the Bennington Triangle. And I did a little bit of research, figured out what that was. And I said, well, crap, that's where I was, 10 years ago or whatever. And that is definitely a weird place. There's strange things that go on up there. Now,
yeah, we're getting a lot of reports of weird lights in association with Bigfoot investigations. Just left and right, they're coming, orbs or lights or whatever you want to call them, UFOs. Yeah. Seems like they're going hand in hand.
And I mean, I saw multicolored lights that were just brilliantly bright. I mean, as bright as a welding arc. Up there, up on the top of this one mountain. Now I saw it from a distance. I never was able to figure out how to get close to it, see what in the world it was. But I also found a place where it's not like this today. But when I was up there in the early 90s, very early 90s, I found a place out north of Bennington and in the north part of the town of Bennington. And there was a road and there were houses on this road. I mean, really nice houses, beautiful houses, some of them. That looked like the people had just walked away from them and just left them sitting there. There was still furniture and stuff in them. And I mean, you could have walked in there and cleaned it up and started living in it, it looked like. But while I was in that area, I was totally creeped out. I felt like something was watching me the whole time. And I didn't hang around. I went up and looked at two of these houses that were sitting there. And like I said, they still had furniture and all kind of stuff in them. And I was really creeped out. And I didn't hang around there very much. But most government facilities that I've been around, if you talk to the right people, you'll find out that there are some kind of Bigfoot stories or paranormal stories that people can tell you. And these aren't just, and these are reliable people. These aren't just, fly by night folks. And a lot of them, wouldn't talk to me until, I was able to assure them that, hey, I'll take them seriously. And I showed them some of my notebooks with some of my sighting reports and stuff in it. And then they would, I just let them read them, and they'd many times open up to me and tell me things. But I was during the decades of the 80s and the 90s, I was amazed the varying habitat that Bigfoot can survive in. I mean, I found them in the most desolate desert areas, like Edwards Air Force Base. If anybody's ever been to it, that place is desolate. And but not too many miles away to the west, across some hills and stuff, there's an area where there's irrigated agricultural fields. And I was able to determine that some of them would travel back and forth over there, for water. And they knew enough about them there at Edwards that they knew that, this little group would hang out, would raid the dumpsters behind the NCO club. This particular one, he might raid the dumpster behind the chow hall, the BX chow hall. This one might, raid the dumpsters behind the officers club. I mean, they knew the habits of the few that lived in the area, because there were so few of them, and there wasn't once they were coming into the base, there wasn't any hiding them. And I was told that the security people there were trained not to hurt them, not to shoot at them or anything like that, just to let them go about and do their business. Now, one odd thing was, went out there one time to meet the shuttle. When the shuttle would land at Edwards, someone would have to, a team would have to go out there and deintegrate some of the experiments off of it before they swung it back up onto the back of a 747 and flew it back down to Cape Kennedy in Florida. And so they would rotate who would go out there and do that. And I got out there and they ended up extending the mission a few days, so we didn't have much to do. And so I got to talking to this one gentleman who was a senior NCO out there, and he was very knowledgeable about Bigfoot. And this was a gentleman that I had first met at another base. And here, some years later, when I went out to Edwards, I recognized him, and he recognized me. But we were talking, and he said, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "But before the shuttle lands, you're going to see some cars out there along the west side. Or vehicles, not cars, vehicles out there, spaced. They'll be back a half a mile or so, or 600 to 800 yards or so back away from the strip, spaced ever so often. And one of their purposes is to keep their eye out for any Bigfoot that might come wandering through the area about the time the shuttle's landing." So the last thing they want to do is have one walking across the landing strip when the shuttle's landing and it show up on national TV, or gets, smashed by the shuttle on national TV.
Right. We can't have that now.
Oh no. And I thought he was pulling my leg at first, but when the shuttle landed, sure enough, there were vehicles out there just like he said. Now, I didn't have any binoculars or anything, and I couldn't take a look at what they were doing, so I don't know if there was any of them watching out to the north and to the west and stuff, up in the canyons and things where they said some of them would come from, and into the north, north northeast. But the vehicles were out there. I can tell you that. But I know that you hear people talk about DUMBs, deep underground military bases.
Yeah,
I can tell you for sure that at many bases that there are deep underground facilities. Now, what all they do, and I've been in some of them, and some of them are, they're for data gathering and stuff like that, but they're a protected place that supposedly could withstand a nuclear strike for the technology of the day. Now, though, with some of the bomb technology that we have, some of these mega bunker buster, mother of all bombs that we have, that even some of the deeper, more protected sites are not safe. But I can also tell you that there are government lands, not necessarily military bases or anything like that, but there are definitely government lands out there that have sort of hidden entrances to underground facilities. And I don't know what in the world they would be for. And like I said, these are not military facilities. Now, there are some out there that have been built specifically to protect parts of our government that are out in sort of remote areas, but there are others that that I don't know what their purpose is. There are others that if you go too near them, you're going to get turned away. But I have been threatened around some of these places. I have had threatened to lose my job. I have had at some very places that you wouldn't believe that anybody would do this, but I've been in there researching and have had people encounter me, and the next thing I know, I'm being called into my boss's office, and he tells me, he said, if you think that I'm going to let your Bigfoot hobby jeopardize the most valuable contract that we have, you're wrong. If I ever hear about you being down there again, you're gone. I mean, I've had that happen to me. So there are sensitive areas scattered around the country that they certainly don't want me poking around.
Right. So what you're saying, Tim, is there's a definite, the government definitely knows what these things are, and they don't want to, they want to keep a lid on it as much as possible.
Correct. I'll give you for instance. There is an area, there is an area that's not very far from me that is a part of the national park system. And I had been hearing some reports of some sightings around one of the parks in this area. And I just happened to be, I was away on a business trip, and I was on my way back to work, and I just happened to be driving right past this park. And so I pulled in, and there was a nature walk through there. Not really a nature walk, but there was a nice paved walkway through this park, and kiosks set up along this this paved walkway that told about what went on there, and what this thing what caused this, and what explaining the nature of the site. And this was a totally innocent thing. And I got there, and I was the only person in there. And it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Beautiful day. And I had taken my dog with me because where I had stayed the night before was a dog-friendly hotel. So I had my old German Shepherd, Bo, with me. And Bo and I were out walking down the trail, and we were enjoying things. And all of a sudden, Bo, and anybody that knew Bo, he knows that he was a chicken when it came to Bigfoot. He started acting sort of hinky, and I started getting the creeps. My skin started crawling, and I felt like that something was just south of us in this grove of young pine trees that and these were machine planted pines, so they were in very neat rows, but they were not very big. The largest one was only like 4 or 5 inches in diameter, but they were just high enough that you could see underneath them. They were tall enough that they had already started shading out all the briars and stuff. So you could see clearly underneath these things for 50, 60 yards. And I was sitting there looking under these pines, and Bo was alerted in that area also. And all of a sudden, he whirled and took off running and ran back to the truck and jumped up in the back of the truck. And I'm sitting there just still staring into those pines, and I started smelling something, which a sort of a sick, sweet smell, which I've learned that is often their breath. And it's when you're very, very close to them, usually within 25, 30 feet or less, that you can smell their breath, in this time of year, in the late summer, early fall. And it's from eating, old fruit and stuff like that. But I could smell this one's breath. I knew it was close, but I could not see it. And in the distance, I became aware of a car approaching at a high rate of speed. And in this particular park, the speed limit is very strictly enforced, and this car was obviously going way over the speed limit. And all of a sudden, and I hear the car stand on the brakes and turn into the part of the park where I was. And he came running up beside my truck, and he got on his PA, and he yelled at me to leave the park immediately. And I'm like, what? And he got out, and he walked a short distance toward me, and he had his hand on his weapon. And he said, if you don't get over here, get in your vehicle, and leave immediately, I'm going to arrest you. And so I went walking towards him, and I said, what's going on? And he said, get your tail end in the truck and leave. So I got myself in the truck, and Bo jumped in there with me, cranked up, and I turned around, and we left. He came right in behind us and closed the gate into that part of the park. And I never have figured that one out. Number one, how did he know I was there? Because this place was, was in a fairly remote area. How did he know I was there, and what was going on in there? Stuff like this, and I've heard lots of other stories like that, not just from me, but I've heard other serious researchers, tell stories like this. But I know that I firmly believe that the government knows a lot about these, but they're keeping it from us, supposedly for our own good, I believe.
Let me ask you this, Tim. How many times have you seen or encountered Bigfoot in your life?
Oh, Lord. A bunch. I couldn't even begin to guess how many times. First time I ever saw one, I was 4 years old. It was right outside my bedroom window. And I was taught about them from the time I was a little kid. Now, I'm 66 years old, fixing to be 67. So when I learned about them back, I was born in 55, and when I was learning about them as a young child, the word Bigfoot had not even been invented yet. That didn't come along till late 60s. My parents and my grandfather, Granddaddy Baker, called them catamounts. My grandmother, she'd call them catamounts. My Granny Baker, she'd call them catamounts, but she also called them the neighbors. My great-grandmother called them Nununui. It's the Cherokee word for them. Neighbors to the west of us called them Hanks. A lot of the other neighbors around called them Boogers. Some of the neighbors that lived out just east of us called them No-Heads. Because if you look at the movie and the book, The Legend of Boggy Creek, the poster that was done for the movie and all, and the cover and the book cover, where there's one going away from them, you'll know why they call them no-heads, because when they're going away from them, they're sort of hunched over, you can't see their head. Same thing. There are a number of pictures of them out there that, and artists can, drawings of them where they're going away from, and you can't see their heads. There's actually a no-head hollow near here, and a no-head hollow road that goes down in it. But I mean, they had a bazillion different names. But I saw my first one when I was 4. But we'd had many encounters with them out here. I mean, we didn't have air conditioning back then, and we used to hear them at night a lot. And you'd hear them screaming and stuff. What's that? What's that? Oh, it's just that old catamount. Don't worry about it. And but I saw my first one up close, really, up close, full body encounter as a young adult in October of 1980. And that was right here, about 100 yards from where I'm sitting right now on our farm. And I had other encounters with them, and close-up encounters with them out here on the farm over the years. I've run into them many times down in Mississippi. I had a very up-close encounter with one a couple of years ago out in Oklahoma. It's the closest I've been to one in a long time. It really shocked me. And what shocked me about it was walking across a gravel road right in front of me, and it did not make a sound. And I couldn't hardly breathe without crunching gravel. This thing didn't make any sound that I could hear. And nobody else heard it either. But we could clearly see it on our thermals. And my buddy Jimmy Osmer and I encountered 3 of them here just back in the spring, not too far from here, not too far from Athens, Alabama. But I've had a lot of encounters with them over the years. Anybody knows me very much has heard me tell this story a bunch. We were out one night researching in an area that used to be very, very prolific as far as sightings went. And we'd already had some wild things happen that night. And two of us, myself and another researcher from St. Louis, Ken Hartung, we decided we were parked on a road, a dead end road. We were pointed out. And by the way, any new researchers that are listening to me, when you go out there and researching and you park your vehicle, you always, always, always point your vehicle in the safe way out. So that all you have to do is jump in it, crank it up, throw it in gear, stomp to the floor, and or whatever you think you need to do. And you're pointed out. You don't have to do a bunch of juking around and backing up and turning and backing up and turning. You need to be pointed in the safe direction out. Exactly.
Joe Barger, when he was visiting, he would do that, and I'm like, yeah. So you do this every time? He goes, yeah. I tactical park every time because I need to get out.
Hey,
that's a really good idea.
Right. My dad taught me that from the time I was. My dad taught me that from the time I was just a little kid. And anyway, so the truck was pointed out, and there was a hedgerow going down both sides of this dead end road. And on one side of it, the south side of it, was a soybean field. On the north side of it was a big hay field. And there were gaps in the hedgerows there, right where we'd parked, so that the farmers could get their implements through the hedgerow and out into the fields. So I decided to walk out into the north field, the pasture, and Ken decided to walk out and walk down the side where the soybeans were. And there was also a thicket of wild plums there on the north side in that hedgerow that I wanted to see, if they were bearing yet. So I walked down there, and I got down there, and I ended up having to relieve myself. So, I unzipped my zipper and started taking care of business, and as I'm standing there, I became aware that something or someone was literally breathing on the back of my head and down my neck. And I whirled around, and I hit a juvenile Bigfoot that was about 7 foot tall. I hit him in the chest and abdomen with my shoulder and left elbow. Needless to say, it greatly startled both of us, and that's an understatement. He bared his teeth and growled at me, and I let loose a string of appropriate expletives. And as it turned out, we both needed to run in about the same direction to get where we needed to go. And we actually bumped into each other again. I had a little do-si-do as we took off running. In the meantime, Ken on the other side of the hedgerow, out in the field to the south, he hears all this, and he hears feet beating. He hears me running, and he hears the heavy of the booger running off. And Ken takes off running to the truck. It was not real late, and the moon, there was a bright moon up. And as I came through the gap in the hedgerow, Ken was passing in the hedgerow on his side of the road. He was passing a small little clump of wild black cherry trees. As he ran past that, I saw one step out of those cherries and swatted Ken across the shoulder blades as he went by. Now, Ken's a big old tall lanky boy, and he can run like the wind. But I can tell you this, he caught a couple of extra overdrive gears that I didn't know he had. He beat me to the truck. Now, this is another thing that you need to remember, aspiring researchers. Do not, if it's your vehicle, you do not leave the keys in the vehicle or with anyone else. Because if something crazy starts happening, they will lock you out of your own vehicle. Because Ken started trying to get into the vehicle, which we had left unlocked, and the doors were locked. There were two people already in the vehicle. They would not open the door. I started, and I grabbed my remote out of my pocket and started hitting the unlock button as fast as it would unlock. The people in the car, in the truck, would relock it. Ken was over there on the passenger side front seat door, yanking the doorknob. Yeah, the handle is just as fast as he could. Luckily, he managed to hit it, yank it at precisely the right time, and get that door open. And once he got that door open, I was able to unlock and keep it, the driver's side door unlocked, piled into the thing, and we took off. Now, the other interesting thing is, well, there were many interesting things that happened down there that night, but on our way out, as we came around a curve through the woods, there were two 6 to 8 inch diameter trees pushed down across the road in front of us that weren't there when we came in. And one from either side. So I didn't have any choice. I had a pretty good brush guard on that truck. So I had to just plow right through the treetops and the limbs and stuff and bounce over the trunks to get out of there. So don't think that they won't try to hem you in. That's happened to me many times, even out here on the farm. I mean, many times I've been back to the back of the farm, and when I come out, there's a tree shoved down across the road.
Wow.
I have.
Yeah, they didn't want you to leave.
Exactly. I have some pictures of that we took up in a place I researched up in Iowa where we hiked back into an area, and I saw this stick formation right off the trail going in, and I took a picture of it. And on the way out, part of that stick formation was thrown down across the trail, as well as a tree pushed down right there. And so I got before and after pictures. But that kind of stuff's pretty common, believe it or not. But back to the Bigfoot, the types of Bigfoot. It didn't take me very long into my research back in the 70s and 80s to figure out that there was more than just one single kind. The ones that we normally saw around here didn't really look like the kinds in the Patterson-Gimlin film. However, the ones that live here on our farm do. And so I started calling them the type 1, I call it, is the Patty type, like you see in the Patterson-Gimlin film. And the type 2 is more of what I call the swamp ape type or Neanderthal type. And if you want to see what a type 2 looks like, you can Google the book Them Plus Us or Them and Us and look at what this is. They did a bunch of new research and figured out that the old drawings and stuff, depictions of the Neanderthal man, were not what we thought they were, but they were much more primitive looking. And look at the drawings in there and lose the vertical slit pupils and the stone-tipped spears and change the nose to look a little bit more human-like, and you've got a type 2 Bigfoot. There's also a type 3 Bigfoot, which is much less common, and they have like a baboon-shaped head, or some people call them the snouted ones or the baboon-headed ones. If you want to see what that looks like, look up the Beast of Seven Chutes, a picture of one that was accidentally caught on film up in Seven Chutes Provincial Park in Quebec, Canada. But that's a type 3, and I've found those in East Texas and Western Oklahoma, Iowa, Central Missouri. I think where scattered around. They're the least common, and I often wonder if they are the results of maybe inbreeding or something. One of the things that I strongly believe is that when the white man came into this country and were trying to wipe out the natives and purposely infected the natives with measles and smallpox and different diseases like that, I think not only did they wipe out the Native Americans, that they also wiped out a huge portion of the Bigfoot population. And therefore you had very isolated pockets of survivors that ended up being inbred. And I think that's maybe a good probability that's where these type 3s come from, because one of the things that I have seen, and Louisiana is another place I found them. One of the things I have seen in places where we find their tracks and stuff, many of them have 3 toes and leave 3-toed tracks. And digits, toes, and fingers growing together in humans is one thing that you get from inbreeding of humans. So I think it's a high probability that could be also same thing with Bigfoot, because I believe that they're very closely related to us. And we know that in humans, when they've been inbred for generations, that the facial features change and stuff like that. And you get a certain look in humans. So I think you'd get, a similar type thing, not the same look, but a similar effect, and you inbreed Bigfoot for too many generations.
So in your opinion, Bigfoot is some sort of creature that's running around like an ape that's just kind of, or is that, what do you believe?
Well, I think they are, they're a hominid, and I think that they're extremely intelligent. They may be the result of a remnant population of Neanderthal. I do believe that they are genetically close enough to us that they can breed with us. I have encountered Native Americans who have very compelling stories, and I have been shown people who have Bigfoot blood in them, according to yes. And I strongly believe that they are our closest genetic. What would you say? That they're closer to us genetically than any other animal. Much more close than chimpanzees or gorillas or orangutans or any of the other great apes.
The one thing that I would say, though, because you have had so many encounters with them, more so than like almost anyone, I mean, that I've talked to, it's because, wouldn't it make more sense, like, if this was some sort of like natural flesh and blood creature, which I'm not saying they can't be. They can become flesh and blood. They can, whatever. But I have a hard time finding people who have seen them so many times without having any kind without it being some sort of supernatural or other type situation. Typically it's like a one-off, they'll see it one time and that's it, because they're so hard and elusive to see.
Well, I'll tell you something, Josh. And, the more I learn about them, the more questions I have. I'll tell you that. And anybody that tells you that they're an expert on Bigfoot is a liar. Also, any decent researcher, no matter if it's Bigfoot or cancer research or researching, asteroids or, planets around other suns, other stars, any researcher that's worth his salt or her salt has got to be willing to relook at their data and change their theories or their hypotheses. I used to think that they were flesh and blood, purely flesh and blood, and they were just like us, and there wasn't anything supernatural about them. However, my friend Jimmy Osborne and I had an encounter just a few months ago, not very far from here, less than an hour's drive from here. And we were trying to find a place where Jimmy and I had both been as childs, and both had very strong memories that led us to believe that, that would be a really good place to go research. And we went out looking for it one night, and turned out we didn't find it. We thought we had gotten close to it, but we were wrong. But it led us to an interesting area, and we were up on top of a steep, fairly high hill overlooking one of the smaller rivers in the area. It's actually a tributary of the Tennessee River. So we were up there, and we ran into a dead end. The road continued on for another half a mile to some like a summer home or something that was up on top of this big hill. But we stopped, and we got out and looked around. We both of us had thermal imagers with us. Mine is a FLIR brand. His is ATN, or it's another one of the better brands. And so we were looking around and didn't see anything. And so we decided to do some calling. And now I'll preface this to say that this was a fairly bright night. It was, there was a high overcast, but it was thin, and there was a full moon or close to full moon up. So there was fairly bright, diffuse light on everything. So we did some calling. Jimmy's got better hearing than I do. And if I remember correctly, he thought he heard something. And we got to looking around with our thermals, and both of us saw a booger came up out of a deep draw, and we were right next to another summer cabin, and that had a nice yard and everything. And back in the backyard behind this cabin, there were a bunch of 55-gallon drums sitting there. And these were plastic drums, and I don't know if they were for water storage or why they had them. But this thing came up and was behind the 55-gallon drums and about 40 yards from us. Jimmy's was new enough that he didn't know how to take pictures with it. My FLIR is old enough that it takes pictures, but it's really rotten quality. We tried looking at it through a little night vision attachment, and it didn't work very well. So anyway, we're looking at this, and we're looking around, and we hear, and we got this went on about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes after the last call I had made. About 10 minutes after the last call I made, straight would have been west of us, we got a very loud answer from across a square 40-acre field. And so that would have put it about, 440 yards from us. We looked over there, and with mine, all I could see was a faint blob. Jimmy's has a lot better range and resolution than mine, and he actually could make out that it was something upright over there as opposed to a deer, because we had seen deer out there earlier. The deer had hauled butt and were gone. This thing, we called back and forth, and this thing walked out into the field and walked out about probably 100 to 150 yards out from the tree line. So it closed the distance to us to about 300 yards. In the meantime, we started hearing something else coming up from the north, where that first one had come from. That was in the meantime, the one that had come up and was by the 55-gallon drums had laid down on the ground on its belly, and it was looking out from behind the easternmost 55-gallon drum and the base of a tree. There was about an 18, 20-inch diameter tree, and the booger was laying in the gap between the tree and one of the 55-gallon drums. we could clearly see him through our thermals. There was another one that was coming up from that direction. It got up there and it did not stop at the 55-gallon drums where the first one was. It kept moving along the edge of the tree line in the backyard of that cabin, coming towards us. It moved up to where it was within 25, 30 yards of us. We could very, very clearly see it. We could even see, even in my sorry one, I could even see the hotter spots where his eyes were. I could, with my naked eye, it was bright enough that I could get glimpses of movement there in the tree line. It walked out of the tree line and out into the road on the other side. Like I said, we'd come up to a gate and had to stop. And the road, went on beyond that gate for about 150 yards and then curved back to the south and went up on top of a hill to, another summer home or, vacation home. This thing walked out into that gravel road and it stood there looking at us. We decided but we both began to feel that we were in danger. In the meantime, the big one that had been screaming at us, that was across the 40-acre field that had been out there at about 300 yards away, he closed the gap to about 200 yards away. And the only thing, but there was a draw in the field that he would have to have crossed, gone down, in, and up out of to get over where we were. But so he was up on the side of that draw, and he was doing some vocals, and he was pacing back and forth, and he'd stand there and he'd be rocking back and forth like they do when they're sort of unsure what they want to do. In the meantime, this other one was right there in front of us, and we were both getting nervous, and Jimmy said, "Light him up." And I've got a pretty powerful flashlight. It's strong enough. I can't remember how many candle power it is, but it's an LED flashlight. It's strong enough that it's got a bunch of cooling fins on the business end of it to keep the bulb assembly cool, or the LED assembly. I clicked that thing on. We couldn't see it. I thought, what the hell? I'm sorry for cussing.
Oh, hell, that's not too bad. Go ahead.
And I raised my thermal back up. I could see it in the thermal, but I couldn't. Neither one of us could see it with our naked eyes, but both of us could see it in our thermals. And when I shined the light on it, even though we couldn't see it in the thermal, we saw it. It turned and it walked about 6 or 7 feet to our right back into the tree line, but it didn't run away. But we couldn't see it with our naked eye. Jimmy clicked on his flashlight and couldn't see it. We couldn't see it. We had both of our flashlights on it. Could not see it, but we could see it in the thermals. Now, it gets weirder. The one that was on the other side of the draw, that was out in the field, that was about 200 yards away, that had come from the far side of the field, it starts moving to the north down the edge of that draw, which was taking it towards the trees that we were near. The one that was right there close to us that we couldn't see with a naked eye, it walks back out into the gravel road. And as we were looking at it through the thermals, at least through mine, its legs and arms and head sort of disappeared. And all I could see in front of me in the thermal, I couldn't see anything with the naked eye, but all we could see in our thermals was just sort of an oval-shaped, fuzzy-edged glow through the thermals. Couldn't see anything with the naked eye. Now,
wow, yeah, I've been in that situation before.
And we looked back over there to the one that was laying on the ground beside the 55-gallon drums, between the last drum and the tree. It was gone. In the meantime, we looked back out in the field for the big one that was that had been on the other side of the draw. It was it had disappeared into the tree line, we figured. And then about that time, we started hearing very heavy footsteps coming towards us through the woods from that direction. That was the point that we decided it was time to open up a extra large, fast-acting can of Gone. So we hopped in the truck and got out of there because there were 3 boogers right there close, very close. One of them was coming at us, and the other one was doing some kind of a disappearing act, and then we had one that we didn't know where it was, where it had gone to. So we decided the prudent thing to do was to leave. So we did. Now, that has changed. I've never had anything like that happen before, but there we were with 2 different brands and quality levels of thermals that we could see this thing with, and some very good flashlights, and we could not see that one with our naked eye. We could see the one laying on the ground. That? No, I have no idea. I don't know what I'm at a loss.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, like, if you know what you say, these are our relatives and they're just like a creature that lives out there and they can breed with us. The way I believe, I mean, maybe they can, because I mean, the fallen angels bred with man, but
exactly.
I don't think that these things are normal flesh and blood, evolutionarily and evolved creatures. I just don't.
Right. No. I think that, but the connection with the Nephilim, the connection with the Nephilim, the more I study it, the more I believe there's something there. I'll tell you something else that we've learned. A few times when I've been in danger, with some other researcher friends have been in danger, we have gotten out of that and have made them leave us by invoking the name of Christ, by rebuking them in the name of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And they leave. If you say, in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, I rebuke you, leave us alone, leave this area. They will. At least a couple of times I've done it. And I know other researchers that have done it. But that's sort of used to. My ace in the hole was a really good bright flashlight shined right in their face. But I have found that rebuking them in the name of Jesus and commanding them to leave, calling upon the name of Christ is more effective. Now, in the heat of a bad situation, you better have thought about a lot about this, so that you can use that technique. But I know the more I learn about them, the more I realize that there is some kind of spiritual, paranormal, weird quality to them, or connection with them.
And when you first started in all this, Coonbo, like you for a long time, you believed that they were just a flesh and blood, anomaly running around out there, right?
Yeah. I thought they were just an undiscovered ape.
Yeah, that's what most people do believe, until they come across a million reports of them doing things that just defy all logic. I mean, I get reports all the time just in this area.
Yeah.
Doing things that just aren't natural.
Anybody that knew Bill White knew that Bill was absolutely one of the smartest, sharpest, most successful researchers that's ever been out there. Honest to a fault, just a wonderful guy. And he passed away back in February. But I was blessed to be able to spend time with Bill at his home, and got to know he and his wife, fairly well. And Bill actually asked me to do a show for him and to tell some experiences that he had, and that his health was bad, and he had promised to do it and he couldn't, so he asked me to do it for him. That's the level of trust that Bill put in me. And but Bill, we got to the point where he and I talked about a lot of stuff that we wouldn't talk about to anybody else. Bill and I were convinced that there is a remnant population of dire wolves in various parts of this country. I've encountered them. Bill's encountered them. There are quite a number of reports. There was even a full mount of a dire wolf that was in a bar somewhere in Idaho or Montana for years until it mysteriously disappeared. But you know, I've seen wolves that look more like hyenas and were huge. That I believe I saw a dire wolf. Bill described the same thing to me. And there is a thing out in parts of the Ouachita Mountains of Arkansas and the Kiamichi Mountains of Oklahoma, which they're the same mountain chain. It's just Kiamichi's on the Oklahoma side and the Ouachita's on the Arkansas side. The locals call it the hissing thing. And Bill and I both independently came to the same conclusion that the hissing things are dire wolves. So there are things out there, but Bill told me a story, and I passed it on, that he was researching in an area out in Arkansas where a law enforcement officer had a series of extremely strange encounters with what he thought was just regular Bigfoot that turned out to be Bigfoot doing things that, you know, that he'd never seen or never heard of them doing. Bill went out there investigating. He encountered one up close, very close. In fact, it was so close, Bill thought it was fixing to kill him. But Bill rebuked it. It turned and it went walking away from him. It walked right into a thicket of privet hedge and briars that you couldn't have driven a tank through or a dozer through hardly, and it just faded right into it. It didn't wiggle a leaf. He said it's like it sort of dematerialized and went into the thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, see,
yeah.
One of the things I think, Tim, is that the reason that someone like you would see this many creatures over your life is because you're an experiencer. And I don't think if these things were completely a physical creature, completely physical manifestation, if it wasn't sort of half spiritual, half physical creature, or just a spiritual creature in its true nature, which we all are, I guess, really. But I mean, like, these things know how to manipulate, you know, and I was just, it would be hard to like, for a flesh and blood Bigfoot researcher, they're going to look at your accounts and go, no way that's possible. No way that this person has had all these encounters when I've been out in the field for this X amount of days and in years or whatever. Because, you know, I mean, some of them like go out there a week at a time and not see anything in areas that are supposedly Bigfoot hotspots. But I tell these people that I believe you have to have the eye. And what I mean by that, in Spanish, it's ojo dotado. That's like the gift of the eye. And if you don't have that, then you're not going to see them. Or if they don't want to present themselves to you, they're not going to. They can manifest themselves however they want. And they can cloak too. There's a whole litany of things they can do. We're quickly on the dire wolf thing you were talking about, Tim. One of the things I was going to tell you, I get a lot of reports here in Texas in particular. I get a lot of them in two different sides of the state. One is in the big thicket in East Texas, where it seems like it's so wild and jungle, and it really is one of two places in the country that's jungle. The other one being in Florida, but it's so thick, you know, in Caddo Lake, you know. I mean, it's like you can't even map it all with a satellite. So you get reports of these prehistoric. Yeah, I mean, it's very jungle like, so dense. You get these reports of these what we actually, it's funny you said the Bigfoots were called catamounts, and I've heard people call them haints, but the catamount, my grandfather used to call the catamount, it was this big, oversized cougar that they would talk about that was like larger than a normal cougar, or it was like a panther. But you get these weird reports of these black panthers, of these oversized cougars. Some of them have really big fangs. It kind of makes you think maybe they're a smilodon or a descendant of a smilodon or some type of them, of a saber-toothed cat. And then you get these reports. Those are kind of rare, but you do get them. But then you get quite a few of these reports of these large hyena-looking creatures. And now, I don't think those are dire wolves. The dire wolf, as we know now, paleontologists have kind of been able to piece together like how they looked. They would have actually looked like foxes, more like foxes, but oversized with like huge, thick bones that are bigger and stronger than an actual wolf. And they would be more closely related to an extinct species of dog, fox, dog type creatures. But these large, you get reports of these oversized wolves. I mean, we've even seen them on YouTube. You're going like, that wolf has to be 200 pounds. You know, I mean, but I've even gotten reports of them being bigger than that, and it looks like an oversized timber wolf. I don't think that's a dire wolf. I think that's something else. I think that could be a relic population too.
Like right here, 50 yards from where I'm sitting is a I've got a big soybean field, and we had winter wheat on it before the soybeans, you know, and when the wheat was up about knee high on me, steel green, this spring, my two German shepherds were out there piddling around after dark, and out in that wheat, and probably messing. Well, they were out there, you know, doing their just nightly little walk, and I was sitting there in the yard and watching them. And I had one of my pretty strong flashlights that would shine out, you know, pretty much across this 40-acre field. You know, shine about 400 yards. They were out near the middle of it. There is a grove of trees and a deep gully that that goes out into this field from the south. I noticed that both dogs all of a sudden had stopped and were looking south towards that grove of trees. And I noticed all of a sudden Jake, the old dog, he took off running as fast as he could on his old arthritic legs, 12 or 13-year-old arthritic legs, coming to the house. Joe was standing there with his tail up in the air and ears up and looking south towards the end of that grove of trees. He even whooped a couple of times. All of a sudden, now, the wheat was high enough that it was up about halfway on the bodies of Joe and Jake, who are large, you know, German shepherds. Jake weighs up, you know, in the 70s, and Joe weighs up close to, you know, like 85, 90 pounds. All of a sudden, this huge canid, wolf-looking canid, comes running out of those that grove of trees to the south, running out in the field, and I'm like, holy crap. You know, I noticed Joe whirled and took off running, and to the house. This thing was after him. It stopped for a second. It ran out in the field and it stopped. When it stopped, I could see 4 or 5, 6 inches of daylight under its belly. Whereas my 85, 90 pound German Shepherd, the wheat was up halfway on his body. I'm like, holy crap, this is an enormous dog, you know, or some kind of a wolf or something. And then it took off after Joe, and Joe is the fastest German Shepherd I've ever seen. He's fast enough that he can chase down a buck deer in the open. He can outrun a buck deer. and this damn thing was reeling Joe in. And I go running down towards the field, yelling and hollering. And as I'm running, of course, I can't really shine my flashlight out in the field very much, but it's bright enough night I could see both animals headed towards me fast. Finally, I got close to the edge of the field, and I stopped, and I put that, souped up flashlight right in that thing's face, and he slammed on the brakes. And Joe came running past me, and up on the porch he went, bouncing at the door, wanting in. And this thing stood there and looked at me for a bit, and then I suddenly realized that I don't even have a gun on me. And I was wondering if I could kill that thing with a good knife and a heavy duty flashlight. But fortunately, it turned and went trotting away. But I've seen a lot of wolves, and I don't know what the hell that thing was. I've seen quite a few wolves.
What color was it?
It was beige.
Mm.
It was beige with a darker colored, snout, and but it was it had a wolf-like, bushy tail. But it wasn't. I've seen timber wolves and I've seen red wolves, and it didn't look like either one of those. But it was taller than I've seen.
Did it look hyena-like?
No, it didn't. It didn't have the big shoulders like the hyenas, like the hyena-looking ones that I've seen. This thing looked like a souped-up, big-ass, bigger than usual wolf. And it did look sort of sharp-featured. Its nose and its ears look sharper than what I've seen on wolves. And it's weird you describing that they think dire wolves were more fox-looking. I don't know. I don't know if that was a dire wolf or not. All I know, it was nothing like I've ever seen before. And I've killed a lot of feral dogs. I've never shot a wolf, but I've seen a lot of wolves. Now back to what you're saying. How come people like me are able to see a lot of them? I research with a group of guys that are utterly fantastic researchers, and most people have never heard of them. Jimmy Osmer, Greg House, Troy Allen, Cheryl Corntassel, Tim Smallwood, and there's others. Ken Davis. We've been running around together for years, and Mark Maychek. Martin knows Mark real well. Martin and I have known Mark about the same amount of time. Right. But one of the things we've talked about many times amongst ourselves is that we believe that people are somehow marked or by these things. That once they have their first encounter, somehow they're able to see them. And like you said, it's something about you're able to see them much more easily after that, and be aware of their presence much more easily. A lot of these guys that I research with grew up around them. I remember hearing them and stuff when I was 2.5 years old. Troy had the same thing. Troy Allen's had more encounters with them than I have.
And it's not unusual. I want to say this. I mean, like people say, oh, it's ridiculous, that somebody could have so many encounters. No, it's not. I mean, if somebody has the ability to see through that veil, then they will see them. And I really believe that these creatures come, I've said this a million times, like, they come into our world and they become more physical as they're here. One of the things I was going to tell you, there was a type of hyena like that lived in North America, and it was more rangy looking than the African hyena. It was like I forgot what you would call it. Like, they call it like the running hyena or the hunting hyena. It's a North American hyena. Here you go. I just looked it up right now. The name of it is hard to pronounce. I don't know if it's Chasma porteats or chasma porteats. I don't know how they pronounce that. But you can just look it right up on Wikipedia, and it talks about them. It says also known as the hunting or running hyena is an extinct genus of hyenas. Yeah, and so it's distributed in Eurasia, North America, and Africa during the Pleistocene epochs. And so when you look at this creature, like, and now somebody told me the other day, I was talking to this guy, and I was actually kind of bouncing some ideas back and forth. He's an author, and I was talking to him at the UFO conference, and he was saying we got in a conversation about these prehistoric creatures from these different eras. The Pliocene.
Hey, I just looked this thing up.
Mm-hmm.
This is the coloration of. I don't know about the stripes on their legs, but this is the coloration of this damn thing I saw. The ears are a little bit different, but the coloration is right.
Yeah, and then the ears may not be because we don't have a physical specimen to take and look and go, okay, like we've found mammoths and different types of Pleistocene creatures, but we don't have one of these that says, hey, like this is, but I mean, when you look at the cases of it, and now this researcher was telling me the other day, he was kind of like saying that he had talked to someone, that fully believed that these were what these creatures were. Now, I propose that what those creatures aren't necessarily totally related to Dogman or Bigfoot or any of these other weird phenomena. If that is a actual true cryptid, that is what me and Barton call cryptids. Barton, what do we call Bigfoot and Dogman?
Inhumanoids.
Inhumanoids.
It's a much closer fit to what we're dealing with here. So the cryptids are simply natural animals waiting to be classified or discovered, which Bigfoot and
or rediscovered,
and all those things like that, or rediscovered, correct? But we're dealing with something totally different here when it comes to these inhumanoids. They're not coelacanths or okapis or giant squid that we can actually go out and find. There's something else they're beyond what we can comprehend at the moment. So
and I don't think they're Gigantopithecus either.
No, definitely not. And Tim, to your point that you used to think that they were our close cousins or maybe a relic hominid, something along that line. There has never been in the history of the earth any relic hominid species that could turn invisible to the naked human eye.
Yeah.
Or walk across gravel without making a sound, or walk across mud without leaving a footprint. They're just, it's impossible.
Yeah. There's no North American ape. I mean, ever that we've discovered any sort of fossil evidence for ever. It's never been done. So, I mean, when you sit back and you look at like the evidence, it's just not there. But you got thousands and thousands and thousands of reports. I mean, heck, between me and Barton, we probably got a couple thousand between the two of us. When we compare notes, it's unreal how many we got. And then you take your stories, Coonbo. I mean, we could all write books until the end of time with this stuff. The thing is, this creature, this Chasma porteats, or whatever it's called, however they want to pronounce it, this prehistoric hyena, this is what I propose, gentlemen, and maybe you guys can give me your ideas. We can bounce them off of each other here, but I think that this thing could be a remnants of a population of these creatures that came from those creatures. Creatures adapt and become different things over time.
Correct.
Correct. I mean, and people argue about it all day long, whether it's evolution, adaptation, whatever. Things do change and become something else, and over time, and it wouldn't be that dramatic of a shift. It would just, exactly. Look at the horse. So when you look at this creature, like maybe its ancestors were these larger, rangier hyenas that died out, 700,000 years ago or however long it was. But then you start to look at like, okay, this thing, their descendants learn to survive by becoming a little bit smaller and not needing as much food, and the megafauna died off, so you didn't have that as prey. So the ones that were able to adapt, like the gray wolves, they were able to adapt and overcome and take down smaller prey, and they were able to hunt more often. they had more stamina, and so they outlived dire wolves and all these other creatures. And so this could be a relic population of a hyenidae type creature. Now when you look at it for a minute here, let's just follow me. Like, go to like with this Mokili Mombembe. That's supposedly a type of brontosaurus that lives in Africa. But when you get the descriptions of it, it's in the middle of the Congo. But the descriptions of it, it's there. You're sitting there listening, and you're going like, there's no way that could be a brontosaurus, because it wouldn't even be a quarter the size of it. Now it would be like twice the size of an elephant, but you're talking like a brontosaurus, would be like 30 times the size of an elephant, or 20 times, whatever it is. It's massive. It's this massive creature that hasn't existed. Okay, folks, so that's going to do it for this episode. Tune into the next episode where I return with my guest and with Barton Nunley. And thank you for listening to PRT. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Good night.